So we are towards the end of chapter 7 today. Is there any context you'd like to give to set us up for today?
Just high level. Again, chapter 7 starts a phase where Krishna Krishna starts to elaborate on a theistic philosophy where he's the center. He explains that he's about to tell Arjuna knowledge which is liberating, knowledge that would allow Arjuna to know him in full. He then goes on to declare that this knowledge is also very rare because many people that attempt to acquire this knowledge are not successful, and those who are even successful, we still don't know Krishna in truth, but now Krishna is about to give this knowledge to Arjuna in truth. So it's very rare, and it shows us something about Arjuna's qualification of being a great student and a great friend of Krishna. Then Krishna moves on to say that he is essentially everything, right? He is that from which everything comes, and he's manifested in the world in various ways in which we could detect even with our material senses, such as the fragrance of the earth and the heat of fire, etc. Then Krishna moves on to say that he is the source of it all, but not necessarily that he is the combination of everything, is him. He's the mere totality of everything. But instead, that everything is within him, but he's also existing above and beyond it, which states a panentheistic philosophy, where Krishna is above the modes. He talks about the modes again as being the reason why we are not able to see him, even though he's so prominent, such as earth, water, air, fire, these things that we can so easily see with our material senses. Still, we can perceive Krishna directly, and the reason why is because of the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Then Krishna describes how there are essentially two categories of people. One category, the people that will surrender unto him, people that will look for the absolute truth. And another category are those people who will not surrender unto him. And these people that don't surrender unto him, mainly the reason why is because their knowledge, their intelligence has been stolen by material desires, right? Which comes by through our association with the modes of passion and ignorance. So I think that will take us right around text 19, which is where we started. Varangi, would you like to add anything else?
No, I think that was, excuse me, a great overview or summary. And yeah, then the next part is Krishna focusing on those that do surrender to him into more detail and how magnanimous they are and why. Yeah, and then today we're covering text 20.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Kim?
Yeah, I appreciated that that overview of going, especially calling out the two types of people, that, you know, those who do surrender and those who have their knowledge stolen, which is an interesting way to phrase it. So looking forward to going deeper into that concept.
Right.
So yeah, we kind of touched on 19 last week and he spent a little more time on 20. So want to get into the verses?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so we can just start with 19. I can read 19. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to, is there something that you'd like to talk about with text 19?
Varangi?
Well, I'm sure you guys covered this last week. I wasn't able to join you, but this concept of spirituality being something that is achieved after many births and deaths, I think it's quite humbling. Um, it's it's not cheap. It's not a cheap process, and it actually requires us to stay in the course, even though it is, I don't want to say difficult, but I would say challenging. You know, it's challenging our attachment to this material world, to what it's shiny, not necessarily valuable, but shiny as an external, I guess, quality of the material world. But here we hear that Krishna is saying, after many births and deaths, you know, this soul has gone through this cycle. You know, it's not, it doesn't happen overnight for everybody. Of course, there's that, those few that are just such magnanimous souls that they even just, they're thought of even in our tradition that they come down to assist us, not even because they have turned away from Krishna, but they have come down out of selfless love to do this mission of helping the rest of us that are like so blinded by materialism to find the way back home. And so certainly most of us have gone through these repeated birth and death cycle. And so Krishna here is describing that person who's actually in knowledge. And I think it's so wonderful how even this far knowledge has been unpacked so fully, you know, like that word knowledge. Just thinking back on all our episodes, I know it's a word that actually comes up every episode, and Krishna is just adding on to it, its meaning. So he's saying actually somebody that is in knowledge surrenders onto me. And it was like, it really gives that final punch in case you didn't get it this far, that real knowledge is the knowledge that leads to Krishna, is the knowledge that leads to surrendering to Krishna. And something that came up to me for me this week was through several classes that I attended, and hearing from Tukram was, I think it was actually on Friday, he might have brought this up, how it's so funny that we think that somebody's so brilliant, but they're still so engrossed in materialism. It doesn't actually fit. It's like if they were actually brilliant and smart, the only consequence of real knowledge is surrender to the Supreme. And I was thinking, and he actually brought this up, like cult leaders and stuff. And I just watched this documentary on Nexium, and how Rainier, he just got sentenced actually to 120 years in prison for this crazy cult that was actually had really powerful and like truthful ideas. Like when I was listening to the beginning of the documentary, I was like, wow, that sounds amazing. Like, sign me up. This is really cool. Like, it makes sense. But really going through the whole documentary and seeing how everything evolved, and how when you leave your God-given intelligence, you really get lost so quickly by the shiny, you know, the flowery words of somebody that's somewhat smart, you know, and he was really smart. And so thinking about that, that situation, it was like, well, he was actually really smart, but his lifestyle, his actions didn't really prove that he was in fact smart. Like, he wasn't using that knowledge, because he didn't have real knowledge, in a way to actually serve humanity. It was all about, how can I serve myself? How can I use this organization or these people to find more, in his case, sexual enjoyment? And in this way, he really destroyed a lot of lives, from people that actually were trying to find some type of spirituality and to improve. And so hearing this verse really brings up that importance of knowledge, the importance of maintaining and protecting our intelligence, you know, using it in a critical way to really deepen that knowledge that will innately bring us to surrender to the Creator, because there's no other, I think, consequence to real knowledge, right? Because we understand, oh, everything comes and is a product of that person. So let me get to know him. If this is so amazing, like, I want to know who's behind it. And so here Krishna so unapologetically, with which Sosa Prabhu mentioned, knowing me, he's so like straightforward. This is me. Everything is resting on me. I'm the cause of all causes. Knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is, such a great soul is very rare. So it's very rare to get to even that position of getting to know Krishna, but that's really the path that we are all meant to take at some point in our journey. And so that text was really loaded. It was, I think it brought a lot of concepts in for me, and I was able to kind of see more of a clear picture of what Krishna has been talking about in the 7th chapter, especially after that beautiful analogy of him being the thread on which all the pearls rest. And so as we move through the 7th chapter, and I know it's going to come up in the next few verses that we're going to cover today, the point is to remember how Krishna keeps describing how everything actually is connected to him. And so if we can see that, we can be in this world and not get swept away by a current of glitter that will really not lead anywhere, although it may seem like it's gold. And so, yeah, I really appreciated 19. It was powerful.
You mentioned in relationship to knowledge, the need to protect it. And that was very interesting to me to hear you saying that, Varangi. I'd like to say a word on that, especially as we move on to text 20, where Krishna says that our intelligence can be stolen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So intelligence and knowledge, it's almost a different way of looking at the same thing. So I think, or at least I suffer from this, right? I suffer from this vice where I believe I learned something, and then now that knowledge is mine, and that I possess that knowledge. And when the situation arises where I may need to use that knowledge, that I will have it because it's mine, and I've conquered. I mentally observed that knowledge, and now it's mine. Okay, so at that point, that might be true, that 1 or 2 days. But if I am not protecting that knowledge by means of constantly shaping my lifestyle, carefully choosing my association, and staying committed to my vows in my spiritual path, that knowledge will not be accessible to me when I need it the most. And therefore, when you said that, Varangi, it really came to my mind the need to protect. Not only we strive to acquire knowledge, but also having acquired it, we also, it's not over, you know, it can be stolen. We also need to make a conscious effort to protect it. So I appreciated it when you said that. I just wanted to expand a little bit on that a little bit.
What a nice point. I didn't even realize it, that was actually the next verse, how it really, and I think you brought up a really, really important point to keep in mind, which is it's it's a combination of both. We do the action of like trying to acquire knowledge, but also it requires grace through the whole process. So you get it because of grace, right? Our teachers bringing us to this path, and we're doing the daily tasks of protecting that knowledge. But also it's so humbling to remember that that can also be stolen at any time, so we don't take it for granted, and we don't take it cheaply, like, okay, I got, like in college, like you get a degree and then you think like, okay, I own this, but really it's that's material. But in the spiritual platform, that knowledge can seep away, can like leave you at the worst of times if you're not careful, if you're not, if you're committing offenses, if you're not being protective, then
Yeah,
it can leave you. So that combination.
it's an excellent point you mentioned, that knowledge actually comes to us by grace, right? Rather than us being the doers of the process of acquiring the knowledge. Well, I mean, in one sense, we are doing something in terms of being sincere and really trying to serve with honesty, like our gurus, those who have knowledge, so that by their grace, they can give it to us, right? And so that's an excellent point too. And then Tukaram Prabhu also says this often, first time I heard from him, that more civilized people in Vedic culture, instead, when they were angry at other people, instead of cursing and doing stuff we do now, they would say, may the teachings of your gurus leave you when you need them the most. That's like a way of cursing somebody that you're really upset with. But on the contrary, if you are a well-wisher of somebody, you say, may the teachings of your gurus always be with you, right? So that knowledge,
like a blessing.
correct. So that knowledge is always available for you, allowing you to discriminate between that which takes you towards to Krishna, as opposed to that which takes you away from Krishna. You're going to have that knowledge to differentiate those two. And again, just to say, because I thought it was very interesting first time I heard from Tukaram, that's a way of cursing somebody. May the teachings of your guru leave you when you need them the most. Because
Like,
then
what could be worse than that?
it can be worse, right? Exactly, because you're going to start acting in a very sinful way, guided by the modes, and you're just going to go deep down a very dark hole. And again, Varangi, what can be worse than that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And it just reminds me of another verse that says there's danger at every step in the material world, you know? So I love this tradition because it's really not based on fear, but fear is such a big part of this world, of living in this world. So you're naturally fearful all the time. But fear can also be very therapeutic. It can help you stay away from things that are bad. Like, why is that bad? That's great. I don't ever want to lose that sense of fear in that regard, right? Fear that can help me stay on my path that actually works, not be stupid and think, oh, nothing's going to happen to me, and then walk into, forgetfulness of these teachings.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's tempering those two things, being very careful and respectful of this path, and at the same time being bold in asking and begging for that grace for us to continue building on that knowledge. So it's quite interesting, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Kim, you were gonna say something.
Oh, no. No apologies. Yeah, just the idea of, I like how you guys are really hitting home the point of grace, and Tukram talks about it a lot, where ours is a philosophy of grace. And that's the only thing I can depend on from day to day is the grace of God to allow me to even have the intelligence to recognize knowledge, to have the conscience to preserve it and protect it, and to not let me stray too far with the shiny objects, as you said. So the idea of grace, I like that our tradition focuses on grace versus fear and condemnation. So
Yeah,
really nice
condemnation.
points.
So in terms of grace, right, the two qualifications our tradition would teach us that a student should have in order to attain that grace from their gurus, from their teachers, is number one, humility, right? Again, even through acquiring knowledge, the sign of a person who possesses true knowledge is that they become humble because they understand how much they don't know. I think Tukaram brought this up. I think it's an excellent comment. And there's nothing worse than somebody with a little bit of knowledge. Because then with that little knowledge, you're thinking you know a lot, right? But you don't actually know much. That if you truly know, if you truly possess bona fide knowledge, you start recognizing how small you are as a soul, right? How small you are, how gigantic this material manifestation is, and how insignificant this material manifestation is compared to the spiritual sky, right? So then things are so much bigger than we ourselves are, and Krishna is the controller of it all. So that knowledge will certainly cause somebody to become humble and have humility, combined with eagerness and enthusiasm to, in that state of humility, serve your guru, right? So that if you have the eagerness and the enthusiasm to serve, not only your fellow spiritualists, but your gurus, right? That combination of humility and enthusiasm is a very powerful formula to obtain the grace of our gurus.
So powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really good point. All right, so
Next 20 for us.
yeah, let's see. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures.
I like how Tukaram Prabhu elaborated on this verse in class as in a mental experiment, a thought experiment, right? As we've been talking about, the possibility of our intelligence being stolen. And then he took us through some thought experiments. Have we ever been in a situation, like I was mentioning earlier, like something that I know, like I know how to act in a particular situation, let's say, that requires some spiritual wisdom, let's say. I know that, I've read it, I've heard it, and I feel like it's mine, I own it, right? But then material desire of pride, recognition, like I want others to know how great I am, or I'm blinded by lust, and like literally blinded by lust, right? Or greed. And that which I know that is a spiritual lesson I have acquired is literally not there. I like the way Arjuna asked Krishna a question in Gita. He says, Krishna, what is this that even though unwillingly, I am being forced to act in this ignoble way? Like, what is that? And Krishna says, oh, it is lust only, Arjuna, right? So that desire literally robs you from your intelligence, and it causes you to act in a way that is ignoble, in a way that does not justify the knowledge you so-called have, because at that moment, that knowledge indeed has been stolen. So yeah.
It's so crazy to think. It's kind of scary, right? How and Tukram mentioned this as an example, how for a lot of us we could have spent so much time developing these spiritual habits for years, even been born in a family that is very spiritual, and we learned from very little how to, connect to the divine. But even just association with the wrong people, it takes just a few seconds for all of that to get muddled and like dusty. He mentioned, the mode of passion is literally translates into dustiness, like a mirror that has dust on it. You can't clearly see through it. And so we could have been training for many decades and many, or years, but if we are not careful enough, then one simple step in the wrong direction can cost us our whole process. And it doesn't happen just like right then and there. It's not like that. It's not like Krishna's not gonna come to the rescue and assist us in so many ways. It does happen that way, but it's actually very subtle. And so we see here, robbing the intelligence is not like a tangible thing. It's not like, and you have a cane and that's your intelligence and somebody steals it. It's not like that. It actually, just like we come into spirituality with a lot of baggage and we kind of purify that as we move forward in our spiritual life, I think also that stealing of the intelligence also happens like that, very gradual. And all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, where am I? Like, what have I done? Why have I, traded a diamond for broken glass? And why would I even think that that is even worth? And he was explaining in class how all of us have experienced that when we fall in love. That changes a chemical, like chemically it changes your brain, so you automatically feel like you're the only one in space or in the world that's going through this, and nobody gets you, and you just know exactly what you need to do, and it's just you and that other person no matter what. He didn't go into this detail. This is just me inputting my own experience, and how you actually, like, at least in my experience, you use the knowledge that you have acquired to kind of real talk now, to kind of manipulate and defend your stupid actions. Like I've done that, and it's so like it's sad and it's shameful to even like get something that you have been gifted, that I have worked for also, my spiritual knowledge, and all of a sudden at the drop of a hat love comes in the scene, and it really steals that intelligence. And then I use everything that is supposed to be used for me to progress in my spiritual life to then help me hide the wrong decisions or the bad actions, bad, actions, so I can get what I want, And we went through these texts not too long ago of how like the science of a fall down, anger and frustration, and then we fall into materialism again because all intelligence goes out the window. And so this is actually something that we can trace, that we can be prepared for, that we can plan for, just like an emergency, right? Having those 911s and numbers and the hospital numbers and everything handy when we see signs of that intelligence getting robbed or stolen, we can do something about it. And hopefully we have protected ourselves enough by being a part of a community that other people know you enough to call you out and to be like, hey, red flag, like, don't do that. That's not smart. You usually would never do this, or so on and so forth. But so the point that I wanted to make with this comment was that it doesn't happen. It's not so tangible. It's not like you can see when your intelligence is being taken away. It happens very subtly and little by little, I would say, gradually. Some instances it does happen like that, but we can do something about it. It's not like, oh well, that happened. It's something that we can be prepared for, that we can be on the lookout for, and also build ourselves a fortress of a community, so they're also looking out for our well-being and for us to not make any stupid decisions when we are in those situations where naturally our good sense is going to go out the window, i.e. falling in love or a crazy tragedy. They say that we shouldn't make life decisions when we're too happy or too sad. And so, all these things, as cliche as they may sound, they are around for a reason. When you're too angry, when you're too exalted, too happy, you're not very level-headed. And so similarly, when we are going through those times, that's when we need the most support. Scripture, gurus, teachers, friends, community, all that is a way that we can protect, like actively protect our knowledge. And so yeah, it actually happens. It's happened to me. And what doesn't break you makes you stronger. But yeah, it's quite scary. It happens very subtly, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, I've drifted so far, And so by that grace that you're connected to, then you're brought back. But it doesn't happen like that for a lot of people. A lot of us just drift away for more lifetimes or a long time. And so yeah, I guess going back to that, how can we actively protect that intangible thing known as knowledge or intelligence?
Yeah, really nice points. I think you mapped out really nicely the process of how subtle ignorance can come in the middle of the night and take away our knowledge and our intelligence. And it's very real. Like I've been, noticing lately about just how little ways that I lie, just to kind of make the other person feel better or to make myself look better. And it's just so subtle. It's just so automatic. And then now I'm, really conscious of all these situations. And it's like you said, we don't go into the situation saying, I'm going to manipulate this knowledge to make myself look better. It happens so subtly under the covers, just these automatic actions that we do to defend ourselves or make ourselves look better when we know deep down that, oh, maybe this isn't the right idea or the right motivation. So yeah, and the idea of being surrounded with good people to keep us accountable, to make sure, to protect us, to protect that knowledge, make sure that thief doesn't come in the middle of the night. I like that idea too, which is really important. So.
Thanks.
You were talking about this cult leader earlier, Varangi. And as I read the second half of this text, something jumped to my mind where Krishna says that those whose intelligence have been stolen by material desires surrender not to demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. Tukaram made a point that in the West world where we live, it is better conceived to speak about celebrities or sport superstars. And those are our demigods here. And then also connecting to the point of things being so subtle. We may see, and I'll give an example, as somebody that you, let's say, admire. The example I have in mind is Kobe Bryant, where you listen to him talking, he sounds like a very intelligent person and very dedicated, very committed to his goals, very focused. And it's like, wow, this is great. If I don't have true knowledge, if I don't have something like Krishna, something that is bona fide, if I don't stand for something, I will fall for anything, right? So then I can start listening to Kobe Bryant and be so seduced by what he's doing and what he's saying. But what is the ultimate purpose of his own life, of his own philosophy? I'm not here to criticize him. I'm just citing as somebody that I actually listened to, and I was like, wow, materially speaking, there are also great insights to be gotten from this person, right? But then again, what I'm trying to highlight here is such as a person like the cult leader you were discussing, Varangi, is so subtle, like how to really know whether this person is presenting something that is bona fide and I should pursue it or not. And then Krishna here is highlighting that when your true knowledge is stolen, you're going to be seduced by cult leaders or Hollywood superstars or sport
Influencers.
Sorry?
Influencers, social media influencers.
Exactly. Or the so-called political leaders, you know, and they can take you so far away. Like you made a point, Bernie, that really resonated with me, where you may wake up one day and realize, man, I drifted so far. I went so far away from what I hold to be the true principles that I want to live my life by. But then you can start going down one of these paths and wake up so deep, so far, you know, especially when it comes down to politics also. You can go so far, and then just because your true knowledge has been stolen, then now we are worshiping other things because we are distracted and we don't have that true knowledge.
Yeah, really
I
good
love
point.
how we could just talk about this forever. It's like let's keep talking about, you know, like every verse has so much.
Yeah, very applicable. So yeah.
And 21?
Yes, 21. I am in everyone's heart as the super soul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity.
I don't know what comes to you guys' mind when you read this verse, but to me, I see Krishna being so, what is the word? I want to say detached, but that can carry a negative connotation, almost as if he didn't care. But I'm saying like a detached in a way where he truly gives us free will. Like he truly allows us to fulfill our foolish material desires, right? To the extent that he's saying, hey, if you actually desire to worship a demigod or Kim Kardashian or Donald Trump, if that's really what you want, like you really into it, you're really passionate about that, Krishna is saying, I will give you the strength by which you can actually continue to do that, right? I see, this is so bewildering to me. Like I've heard quite a few years ago, devotees talking about Krishna's most prominent qualities, right? Even Arjuna asked in Gita, Arjuna asked Krishna to tell him, you know, tell me more about your qualities, because Arjuna is feeling so inspired, right? And Krishna says, oh yes, I'll tell you, Arjuna, about my qualities, but only of those that are most prominent, because my qualities are infinite, right? But then he starts to describe some of his quality. It will come up soon in the following chapters where he's talking about things that we appreciate, right? So like how powerful a lion is. He goes, I am that power in a lion, right? Anyways, so one of Krishna's prominent quality is his quality of being detached. And I never really truly understood that. Again, thinking of this more cold way of being detached, to the point where I don't care. Oh, you over there, I'm over here, and I don't care. I'm God, I'm having a good time. You're there, you're struggling, I'm detached. You can just be there and I don't care about you. Obviously, that's not the case given everything we've been talking about so far in Bhagavad Gita. But this verse shows me that unlike the so-called jealous God of Christianity that says you must worship me and no other God, otherwise you go to hell forever. Krishna here is saying like, hey, go fulfill your desires. And then when you realize that you're still not satisfied and that your heart is truly yearning for true love of me, then you come back to me and I will never left you and I will still be here waiting for you. But he gives us that free will. So first time I ever read this verse, this was so powerful in my mind. What does come to your guys' mind when you hear this?
I love that point. Thank you for sharing that. I, as I'm hearing you, I'm like, wow, yeah, Krishna actually sounds like a very mature person who
Yes.
doesn't have self-esteem issues, who
Yeah.
doesn't have hangups about abandonment and resentment and like pettiness. And he just knows who he is. And he also knows who we are. And because there's real love there, he has no doubt that at some point we're going to realize that he's our only best friend. And so it's like, I'm going to wait for you. It's like, he's like the most loving, and that detachment, like you said, it could sound bad, but it's really reminds me of, I'm not a mom, but I'm a daughter. So I remember my mom so many times being like, when I would get upset or something, I remember even saying, I don't like you anymore, or trying to be hurtful or something, right? And I was like, okay, well, I still love you. And like, she didn't break down and had a fit and like forced me to say that I loved her or locked me in my room so I could never go away. No, she just knew. It's like, okay, she's a child. She's throwing a tantrum. She's obviously going to get over it. I love her to death. Like, I'm her mom. I'm here for her all the time. It's like, whatever. So it reminds me of that. It's like that consistent, unconditional love that doesn't matter what I do, it's always going to be there. But my mother is going to give me enough freedom for me to grow into who I am. And hopefully one day I can remember and realize what an amazing figure she has been in my life, right? And so it reminds me of that. Obviously, it's a different category altogether, but it allows me to appreciate Krishna's tone, because it's like, okay, if I can see this in somebody that's also in a material body, what's to speak of Krishna, who's like beyond it all? And he loves me. And that's really the basis of our argument that Krishna is an all good God. And there's actually not another option for God to exist. If he wasn't an all good God, how could he possibly be God? Like, it would be terrible, or a monster. And so it's really highlighting that beautiful quality, like you brought up, that he's so sure of himself and he's so sure of us. Like, he actually sees the best in us. Like, he knows that we're gonna come back to him. Like, that's how much trust he has in us. And we're so foolish that we throw these tantrums thinking we know better and we're just gonna like do our thing and we're gonna find happiness somewhere else. So yeah, that tone of like being very mature and loving and consistent, and nothing moves him too much, but at the same time he's fully invested in our rehab, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? I don't think, have we gone through those verses where, I don't think so yet. That's escaping me. Anyway, if I think about it, I'll bring it up. It's I
What
don't
were
think we
they
have gone
related
over
to,
it.
the verses?
This point of I think it just escaped me altogether. I was trying to think of the exact verse, and I'm like, wait, what was that connected to? I'll think about it. But yeah, I appreciated your point, Sosa Prabhu. It
Yeah, I like that you
mind
made.
blowing.
I like the point you made saying that Krishna knows who he is and he doesn't have any self-esteem issues. That um, made me remember something Tuckerman brought up in class too. He was quoting somebody else, I believe it was C.S. Lewis or something, that the fact that our desires are not truly fulfilled in the material world is a proof that I exist beyond it,
Mm,
that the fulfillment that I actually am looking for must be beyond matter because I've been in matter for countless lifetimes. Or let's say, if you don't believe in reincarnation, just your own lifetime, we have acquired so much, we have achieved so much. And there's that little corner, if you really become introspective in your heart, that you're not truly 100% satisfied. Maybe it's because you have recognized that there's entropy and things move from order to chaos naturally, and you're going to have to deal with that as long as you're alive, or that you're in time that ultimately everything is going to be taken away from you. So whatever it may be, there is that aspect of our existence here that remains unfulfilled, and that should be a proof that we are meant to exist in another realm. And Krishna here also is aware of that. So he's saying, hey, you want to worship some demigods or some celebrities? Sure, go ahead. You're ultimately going to realize that that's not it. And I am what you're looking for. I don't have any self-esteem issues. So go ahead, try it, realize that's not it. And then you come back to me. And when you do come, that will be the best version of our love. Not
mm,
that I robbed you of your free will, not that I don't know, I sent you to hell for longer than you should have been, and then you learn by suffering so much. But no, because he truly chose me, because we really chose to love Krishna, and that would be the best version of our love. And Krishna is aware of all of that, right? He's self-confident. So
mm,
this verse, there's so much in there.
Yeah, really good points. I really like the idea that you brought up, Varangi, about this proving that Krishna is an all good God. I was talking to my brother the other day, and he said that his conception of God was that God was completely indifferent, just kind of completely detached, indifferent, observing, very curious about things that humans do, but completely indifferent. And that really kind of blew my mind that people think about that, and really kind of highlighted all the different conceptions of divinity that there are. And the idea that we subscribe to the idea of an all good God is very pervasive and very powerful when you think about it and break it down into a verse like this, where, like you said, God is not petty, God is secure, knows who he is, but also Krishna says, I make his face steady. So it's not only that God is saying, okay, children, you go off and do your little thing, but he's also giving us that desire, that faith, strengthening our faith to go off and play with materialism, play with demigods. That just amazes me. And when I first read it, I thought, can this be right? Like,
mm.
am I reading this text
Is
correctly?
this a typo?
Yeah. So yeah, this concept just really blows my mind, and like you said, really indicates an all good God and what his ultimate desire is for us to come back to him in a perfectly free will, purposeful manner to love him.
Mm.
Mhm.
I remember now what I was thinking about, and I want you both to correct me if I'm wrong in linking these ideas, but it did come up. So I was thinking about the section where Krishna says um, that he reciprocates with us according to how we come to him. Obviously, that's not word for word. I wish I knew in what section in the Gita this is. I don't know if either of you can think of it. But it really highlights that other quality of Krishna, of him being very fair, and and how it could easily, that verse could be interpreted that Krishna is actually biased, not impartial, because also in that verse he says that he really gives himself fully to the devotee. And so I was thinking that in relationship to this part, to these texts, where he's, saying, like Kim just mentioned, making that faith steady for that person to even become more devoted to that other deity, to that demigod, to that superstar, to that influencer, to that politician or whatever. It's really him being fair, because what that person is coming to him for indirectly is wanting to have a strong relationship with that representative. That's not him, it's his representative. It's a part of Krishna. So indirectly, that person is trying to fulfill that innate void that we have as souls, to reconnect with our source, Krishna, but we are misusing it by trying to connect somewhere else, because we are bewildered by the shininess of that other person that can give us what we want right away, as opposed to connecting to the real source. So I want to be really careful, because one of my many flaws is that I lose my train of thought because I become really passionate about something else that comes up. So I'm trying to be very regulated in my thought now. Thank you for bearing with me. So that's one point. The other thing is, so this person wants to fulfill this void. They're going around circumventing Krishna, going to somebody else. Krishna is then realizing this person is very sincere. They want this so badly. And so I'm going to make it happen, because that's what they're giving me. That's how they want to connect with me indirectly. Therefore, all I can do is I'm bound to reciprocate with them, because he's impartial. Now, juxtapositioning that situation to a devotee who has still material desires, somebody that is going through this process but hasn't purified their heart enough. So we still have desires, material desires, but somehow or other, by grace, also coming from Krishna, directly and indirectly, he or she has understood that, hey, I'm not going to come to these other representatives, because why do this if I can go to the top? Why talk to a store manager if I can talk to the owner, right? It's like, so this person is really opening up and becoming so vulnerable to get on this path that you don't even know if you're going to make it. Like the prime example is Arjuna. He's like, Krishna, I want to do the right thing, but I don't even know if I'm going to be able to make it. He even says that in the previous chapter. And so how can an all good God not be bound to reciprocate also 100% fully with that sentiment of like, this person doesn't even know if they're going to make it. This person can get so many good stuff right away by going to A, B, or C, but instead he doesn't want to go to that fast, immediate pleasure. There's a psychology term, immediate gratification. Is that what it is?
There's delayed gratification and immediate gratification.
Immediate, okay. So immediate, they're really abstaining from just like a junkie, right? Going for that next dose. Just like, okay, I want that. I'm not going to lie about it. This is what I want, but I'm going to delay it because I know there's something greater and I may not even ever make it. So when I thought about these two situations, you really can understand, I was able to understand a little better how Krishna is actually the opposite of being detached. It's not that he's detached. He actually is so fair and so invested in us that he fully reciprocates with however we want to connect with him. So if we want to connect with him indirectly, he gives us everything he can for us to do it that way. But if we want to come to him with all our flaws and desires and dust and craziness, he'll take us as that and fully pour himself into that process. And what happens is that by that direct connection with Krishna, we actually become purified of those desires. So it's actually really amazing how that happens. It's not that Krishna is like choosing the devotee over somebody else. He's not partial, he's impartial, but because this person is sincerely trying and humbling himself to do the right thing, even though he's not doing it right, he or she, Krishna is bound to reciprocate in that way. And guess what? Because that person has done that work, he gets everything he wants from Krishna. And so anyway, was that clear? That was a lot of different points in one thought, but I hope that I was able to express the main point.
I hope I understood what you said, because I think I got something very interesting. I like to put it to your investigation, see if I got it right. But it's a very nuanced point that I really liked, which is connected to the idea that every form of enjoyments or whatever it is that we can experience in the material world actually exists in its pure original form in the spiritual world, right? And so the very nuanced point you made, Varangi, that I think I got it, is that that person who is worshiping a demigod for some immediate gain, let's say, is actually in actuality desiring that aspect of the original pleasure that exists in the spiritual world that only Krishna can give, but that person is bewildered that person is looking for a lesser form of that same origin, which is Krishna. And that person is therefore wanting Krishna, but in this bewildered way. And because that person really wants and is being sincere about that desire, that person also wants immediately. So that person is going through a demigod. And Krishna, being an all good God and fair, is going to reciprocate with that accordingly, meaning he's not going to give it to the person himself, which would have been the original form that exists in the spiritual world, in the original spiritual relationship, but he's going to allow that person to have it, but through this indirect way, which is less, because it's covered by ignorance and is coming through a material like demigod and so on. Is that the point? Is that part of the points you made?
Yeah, thank you. And you said it so much cleaner and easier to understand. Yeah, that is it. And that it's limited. But not because Krishna is limited in giving. It's because the person is limited in receiving.
Yes.
That person can't take more or doesn't want to take more. Therefore, Krishna respects that. But then the other example, this person comes on, it's like, I don't know what I can hold, but I want it. And I don't know if I'm going to even make it. So Krishna just pours it. And because of that direct connection, there's that natural expansion of that devotee's heart. So the more that he stays on the path, the bigger that cup gets. So the more that grace flows. And so that the more that those material desires get purified. But yeah, thank you.
That's a
You
very interesting
nailed
point.
it.
Very interesting
Yeah,
point. It also highlights how foolish we are, right? Because we are wanting a lesser version of something and fully believing that that lesser version will satisfy us, when in fact it will not. And it also is also connected to the idea that if you are truly in knowledge, you surrender to Krishna, the actual source of everything, because you then realize that even this is smaller, lesser version of our so-called temporary happiness here has its source in Krishna. That is also Krishna. It's again, lesser, or what is a better word? It's a more contaminated version of that pleasure, but it is nevertheless Krishna. And if you truly realize that everything is Krishna, even that lesser taste of fulfillment, that is also Krishna, then it's like, wow, then how much better would it be? You know, we're talking about experiences we may have in the material world, such as parental love or conjugal love, like your lover and beloved and etc. That can get very high, but then we are perhaps not experiencing that version in its pure form, in its original form, which is directly aimed at Krishna. And if you truly understand that that is actually existing, and then it is there, and it is Krishna, you would surrender to Krishna, anything else.
What a
Really
nice
great
point.
points. Yeah, I'd love to talk about this for another hour, but we are at the end of our time. So I'll just read the last couple texts that we went over in class, and then we can have some closing comments from you. Text 22, endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. And text 23, men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planet of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet.
I think everything we've been saying was captured in
Covered it.
facts. I mean, we were elaborating on these things without even knowing that Krishna himself was going to talk about them, right?
So true. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you both for sharing your insights about these topics. Um, I'm feeling really emotional because it's something that I should be thinking about more often that I don't, but also very fortunate that I get to tap into that with you guys in these episodes. Um, One last thing, which is something that Tukram really focused on at the end of his class on Friday, was that everything in the material world we should see as a manifestation or a connect that is connected to Krishna. And if we are able to see that connection, there's no way we can step wrong, because there's always going to be that reminder that it's not about taking it personally. It's not about, how this is affecting me in a negative ways. What lessons am I supposed to learn from this? It's a conversation with the Supreme. And so ultimately, which we have talked about, it's understanding that we're all trying to fill that void that turning away from Krishna has left in our lives. So we try to fulfill that in any way possible. Some of us by connecting with partners, thinking that they're supposed to make us happy, or that our parents should not make a mistake, and I should have a perfect childhood, or so on and so forth. But if we really understand that all those things are just simple conversations with Krishna, then we're able to understand that our priority in life is to be able to use those opportunities to get better at loving him, or even just remembering that at some point we are supposed to love him, because that's the only thing that actually matters and is real. And so I thought that was a nice point, that how he brought it all back, like, okay, this has been the theme of the 7th chapter, how he is behind it all, in it all, but then now he's talking about demigods and people coming to them. And I really appreciated how he really highlighted that part. And I think this was only part of the Zoom class that got streamed. I think on IGTV we didn't get to that conclusion, but obviously it was part of the whole conversation. But yeah, and how revolutionary it would be for our lives to remember that connection, to see Krishna's hand in everything. It's so difficult. I mean, for me, it's like, wow, it really takes these moments of conversation for me to realize that. But in the heat of the moment, or when you're so involved in like a conflict in your material life, it's so difficult to remember, oh, this is just a conversation. What am I lacking here? What do I need to work on to be able to connect with Krishna better? Because ultimately that's what we're all trying to do, is to reconnect and to improve that relationship. Anyway, that was the last point I wanted to bring up.
It's a very powerful point you made about the experiences we have that causes us to be angry, irritated, and so on, is nothing but a void left by Krishna. And that truly to fulfill that void, we need Krishna, instead of to expect that our significant others or our bosses or friends and families, etc., are going to fulfill that void for us. They will never, because they are limited beings like we are. Only Krishna can fulfill the void that we experience here. And by his absence, we are being destroyed. And
Yeah.
only he can fulfill that. And it's quite foolish from us to expect that other people will fulfill that void on Krishna's behalf. It is too much for them to do. They cannot. Only Krishna can do that. And the more we surrender to Krishna, the more that void will be fulfilled internally, the less expectations we'll have externally, and truly be able to act like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu inspire us to act, which is to offer all respect unto others and expect no respect back to ourselves, more tolerant than a blade of grass and more humble than a tree, you know, because we are fulfilled inside. That void is no longer there, and we don't expect these things from the material world anymore, you know. So it's a very powerful point that you made there, Verandi. The last thought I want to bring up, I know that in class 2, Karam spent a lot of time talking about existence of evil and an all good God, and whether God is fair or not, and so on. I just want to make one last point on text 23. It really, again, it keeps on highlighting to me how Krishna is an all good God, and that part of being an all good God is that he would be fair. An all good God would have to be fair. And to me, this is so fair. He says, men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. He's just stating how it is. But then he says, those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods. I mean, Krishna is the creator of the system, right? So he created, like, he's just explaining how the system works, but he created that system, which by reading here with discrimination and logic, it seems really fair. If you worship the demigods, you go to the planets of the demigods. And, but my devotees who worship me, they ultimately come to me. Like, what can be more fair than that, right? So this is a very small peek into a all good God who is fair.
Beautiful.
A wonderful way to end the class. Thank you both. I really heavy points too. So I encourage the listener to go to, you can go to the Facebook page for Laguna Beach ISKCON, and you can hear the post-class discussions and everything that Varangi mentioned. I really encourage you to do that, because Tukaram, he doesn't shy away from any tough questions, you know, getting into the idea of, oh, Krishna helping us worship demigods. Everything's connected to Krishna. So when we understand that, then there's nothing really truly evil or horrible in this world. It can all be tied back to him. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you next week. Once again, Haribol.
Haribol.